Return to that controversy over the rancher Cliven Bundy, who's in a fight with the federal government over federal grazing fees. His racist remarks have clearly blunted that message, caused so many of his supporters to simply bail out.
You know, maybe I sinned, and maybe I need to ask forgiveness, and maybe I don't know what I actually said. But you know, when you talk about prejudice, we're talking about not being able to exercise what we think and our feelings, but we don't have freedom to say what we want. If I say Negro or black boy or slave, I'm not. If those people cannot take those kind of words and not be offensive, then Martin Luther King hasn't got his job done yet.
Well, let's bring in our chief congressional correspondent, Dana Bash, and our CNN political commentator, Paul Begala, who's just written very, very tough piece on CNN.com. Some of it very funny, but you're on fire when it comes to the fallout from this whole incident. Give us a little nugget.
Well, I think the more interesting thing is not that this rancher has said this racist stuff, which is newsworthy and it's reprehensible. It's how, before he said that, right-wing pundits and politicians jumped to his side in his defense. And my argument is, they should have known better. I mean, there's a pattern here. They keep finding these folk heroes, Ted Nugent or Joe the Plumber or the Duck Dynasty guy or more notoriously George Zimmerman, and they rush to their side, and then they're shocked when they say outrageous things. They just ought to know better, candidly. And if they'd applied their real principles, conservative principles, to this situation and just changed the facts a little. What, for example, I argued this in the piece. What if, instead of a rancher out in Nevada, it had been the new Black Panther Party, and they'd holed up in a city, in a federal facility, and for 20 years have been taking federal property and not paying for it? Do you really think Sean Hannity would be out there in sympathy for them or any of these right-wing politicians? Of course not. So my interest is more in the right-wing politicians and pundits who seem duped every time by these eccentric characters.
What's been the political fallout from all of this, Dana?
Well, you're certainly right that many of those, not surprisingly, those who maybe need viewers and those who want Republican-based voters, maybe those who are thinking about running in 2016, many of them ran to his defense. Those are the people who are quickly saying that, distancing themselves from him. The Rand Pauls, the Rick Perrys, people like that. But it should be noted for the record that the major Republican organizations, the RNC, the NRSC, which is a group that tries to help the Senate get elected, which is the big money prize this fall, they didn't say a word about it. In fact, one of my sources at one of those groups said to me, I was asked by reporters many times, and I don't want to talk about that Yahoo, because he just had a feeling about it. So, you know, there is a sort of a difference within the Republican Party about who runs to these folk heroes' defense. The other thing that I will say is that I've got a lot of frustrated phone calls from Republican sources saying, you know what, there's a double standard. We heard Sean Hannity say this on his program yesterday, but some of my Republican sources were giving me specifics. For example, a sitting governor in Illinois, Pat Quinn, tweeted out something, an article which talked about Jewish people collaborating with the Nazis during World War II and likening that to black voters who support his Republican opponent. Now, they had to apologize for it. It's not the same kind of thing because he wasn't saying explicitly racist remarks, but it's not just a Yahoo from Nevada, as some would say. It's a sitting governor. And the point there is that they don't get the kind of, Democrats don't get the kind of scrutiny necessarily that Republicans do.
Here's the difference. First off, it's reprehensible. If that's the first I've heard of it. But of course that's reprehensible, and Governor Quinn ought to be ashamed of himself. As I say, as a Democrat, he is in my party as well.